Welcome to How Did They Play podcast, the Premier League edition. This time, lads, I've not used the ChatGPT to help me with the introduction, so I'm going to keep it simple this time. There are 3 players that we're going to discuss and we're going to present to the group, and we're going to see which Premier League nostalgic player makes it into the LQQ. To join, well, the spoiler alert is Jason Puncheon and Kevin Doyle got in from the first 2 episodes, so we're now looking to who's going to join those 2 in there. Connor, just before we start, can you just recap which teams that we all got drawn from your spin the wheel, please?
Yeah, so on this episode then, Adam has drawn Wolves, Liam has drawn Pompey, and I have drawn Charlton Athletic.
I'm so excited. Right then, with that being said, Adam, can you give your player, please?
The player that I have chosen has played for Wolves during the 2009-10 season, so mid-range really for when they were in the Premier League. And I have gone for one Matt Jarvis.
Yes.
Yeah, Matt Jarvis.
I have gone for Matty Jarvis just because I was looking through the archives of all of the Wolves squads that have been in the Premier League, and I was thinking, do I go really early when they were first in the Premier League, like 2003 time? Do I go more current because they're not in a good way at the minute, and you could pick a few players that shouldn't really be playing Premier League football? But I thought, no, I go for a bit of the mid-range, so I've gone for Matt Jarvis. Now, Matt Jarvis played for Wolves. He played 164 times for Wolves between the years of 2007 and 2012, scoring 19 goals. Now, I think that it's a decent return, especially in a Wolves side. Now, interestingly about Matt Jarvis, he actually made his Premier League debut against West Ham, which, funnily enough, is another club that he played for in the Premier League, where I thought that was an interesting little thing there.
Yeah, he played a few times for West Ham. I remember him playing there and bombing down
Yeah.
the wing. I was just looking on here, and obviously him playing for Gillingham. I don't know if you're going to go on to that, but him playing for Gillingham beforehand 110 times.
I was definitely going to touch on that because he's had sort of like, he started off at a lower level, then had a peak, so to speak, in terms of football, and then had just like a massive drop off after playing for Wolves and West Ham in the Premier League. Like his most recent club was Woking.
And he only played a few times for them as well.
He's played for clubs like Norwich City, he's played for Walsall on loan. The fact that his last club was 6 years ago nearly now, and it was Woking, it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's
but it
a
just,
lot.
I suppose when they get to that age and they get that point of their career, they just look for that step level down, because when you've made that many appearances in the Premier League, when you've played that level of the Championship, and then you eventually you drop down to the National League, obviously, yes, it is a big step down, but given the age he is, he can go into those dressing rooms and be very, very influential towards the younger lads, to the ones who were inexperienced. And if Woking at the time are trying to push, for someone like Matt Jarvis going and signing him, it's a big one, isn't it?
Oh, 100%, 100%. But what I found, just going back to his time at Wolves, what I found interesting was, obviously, when you talk about Matt Jarvis, you have his time, obviously, at Wolves, at West Ham. Obviously, he played for Burnley as well in their time in the Championship. And everyone remembers Matt Jarvis as this, like, bombing winger, like, putting loads of crosses in, getting loads of goals and assists and goal contributions in general. But during the 2010-2011 season, he only scored 4 Premier League goals.
And you think about that, after that, he scored another 8 goals, 37 in the 2011-12 season. Before that, in the 2009 and 10 season, he scored 3 goals. So even from a wide standpoint, he was still contributing towards the goals. It may not be a lot, but he's still contributing towards those goals.
100%. And another point I got on Matt Jarvis here, he was actually, in 2011, he was actually awarded both Supporters Player of the Year award and Players Player of the Year award. So I think that goes back to your, like, talking about experience and stuff. When he's in and around the changing room and he's got that connection with the fans as well, I think that's why he managed to play for different Premier League sides, of Wolves and West Ham in particular. But I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people remember him, was because he was a fan's favourite and he was a player's favourite.
I wonder as well, because that's obviously off the back of the only scoring 4 Premier League goals, but I wonder what sort of percentage that was of Wolves' goals, because I can't imagine they were scoring that many in the league that season. They were, struggling
They
down
were
at the
feeding
bottom.
our man, Kevin Doyle, from the last episode. They were feeding him.
Yeah, that's why Kevin Doyle's made it into the league. Maybe Matt Jarvis will, we don't know yet, but that is why. Kevin Doyle was scoring all the goals. But
He
just
worked
moving on.
bloody hard though, didn't he, on the wing? He did
Yeah.
work
Oh, yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
he's at like you think about him playing for Mick McCarthy, like he is a proper winger. He is a track the opposite winger that he's playing against, go and help and support his fullback. Then again, go into on the attacking phase and go and whipping crosses in. He's just that workhorse, isn't he, down that side? And I imagine the Wolves fans watching on the sidelines would have absolutely loved him. And I just think about him in that Hammers shirt. I mean, some of the goals he scored in that one, especially the one against Spurs, which he absolutely rifles into the top corner on the top left-hand side. It's a fantastic goal. It's a real hard finish as well, and that he's made there. So I just think he's got it all, hasn't he, Matt Jarvis, on them wings?
I agree completely. And I also think there was a lot of 4-4-2 being played in that era of the Premier League. And when you think about right wingers or right midfielders, shall I say, that played in the Premier League at that time, he was like the blueprint almost of a right mid. Like you think, like Liam said about the tracking back, the bombing on, the creating chances, scoring goals and stuff like that. I just think that he is the embodiment of a right midfielder, especially in that era of the Premier League under a manager like Mick McCarthy. Obviously, he's played for West Ham as well, like Liam mentioned. He actually signed for West Ham in the 2012 season with an initial fee of 7.5 million.
And forward to Norwich.
They
Make a loss on
sold
that.
him. They sold him. Yeah, they did make a loss on that. So they sold him to West Ham, signed him for, we'll call it 10.75 million, obviously with all the add-ons that would have been added on. They sold him to Norwich only 3 years later for 2.5 million.
It's the West Ham way, isn't it? To buy players for big money. Or, well, I mean, that was big-ish money at the time. And then, sell them on for next to nothing. But like even that 10.75 million, that to me seems like a lot.
It does, but it just shows the workhorse that he was. West Ham at that time, I think that was Sam Allardyce era. I want to say that that's correct. 13 season. So Sam Allardyce was in charge, yeah. So, at that time they had Kevin Nolan, which I'm sure he'll make an appearance on this podcast soon. That year they finished 10th. So the year that he signed for them, they finished 10th. And you think he started 32 of them games. And I imagine on that right-hand side, he was a real pivotal part of that team. I think about the team, he went and been number 7 there. So would you actually say that's a step up for him, going from potentially relegation scrapping with Wolves to then going up a level and going competing for Europa League places, basically, wasn't he?
I think I completely agree, and I think when you really think about Matt Jarvis, especially at his time as at Wolves, I think that's why West Ham paid the money. Because if you think about the managers that Matt Jarvis played under, they're all very similar. So obviously you've got your Mick McCarthy's at Wolves. Obviously you've got your Sam Allardyce's at West Ham. Obviously then he played under Sean Dyche in the Championship. They're all the kind of pragmatic style of manager, and I think he was more suited to that style of football. And I think that's why West Ham did pay the 10.75 million for him.
I was just looking at who else West Ham had in that squad that year. That was the year they had Andy Carroll on loan from Liverpool. Matt Jarvis down the wing supplying Andy Carroll. That should have been bags of fun to watch and bags of goals within it. I don't know how many Andy Carroll got that season, but yeah, like you said, to finish 10th is fairly decent for West Ham at that time.
Obviously,
they'll argue that they should have finished higher probably because they think they're a big club.
but Wolves obviously got relegated in the Prem, and then obviously they've sold him then for 10.75. Would he have actually left Wolves if they'd have stayed Premier League? Not sure.
Well, you saying about that, obviously it does depend on whether they stay Premier League or not, but Matt Jarvis actually handed in a transfer request at Wolves when they got relegated.
Yeah,
So I
that was
think
after he
that
was linked to West Ham. Yeah, I didn't know, but I didn't know this as a stat. Just how many England appearances did he make?
so Matt Jarvis in 2011 has 1 England cap.
So did you know that his 1 England cap, he was the first Wolves player since the 1990 season when Steve Bull got into the England side. So he's the first Wolves player to get an England cap since 1990, and Steve Bull was that player to do it. And he only got in because Theo Walcott and Adam Johnson both got injured.
He then came on as a sub against Ghana. Came on for Jack Wilshere.
Right, so that is Adam's pick of Matt Jarvis. So Connor, I'm going to come to you next. So we've already got Matt Jarvis, who is potentially in the pool to go into the LQQ. So Connor, who is your player that you've had this week? Can you just remind us of the team that you had and the player that you've picked?
Yeah, so I had Charlton and I had a good look through their squad, and I came across a player who I knew had played at Charlton, and I think this player is somebody that absolutely his quality was questioned a lot during his career. But doing my research into him, there was actually a lot of quality there. So I've gone for Darren Bent.
Yes.
I love that pick.
Yes.
Yeah,
Benty.
yeah, good old Benty. Because looking into his career, I've just found absolutely fascinating. And I wasn't sure who to pick from the Charlton squad because they had, I think, 6 or 7 years in the Premier League. And there's so many players that have played for them that could absolutely be a perfect fit for this. But he stood out because he was seen as one of those players that guaranteed goals, but for sort of your mid-table clubs, really. He was quite often criticised because he was quite inconsistent. But actually, when I go into his record and the amount of goals that he scored, it's absolutely unbelievable how underrated I think he was. So he started off his career at Ipswich, who obviously I got in episode 2 as my club. He came through their academy. They were playing, when he came through, they were playing in the Championship, trying to get back up into the Premier League. He scored 48 in 122 for Ipswich, which wasn't not a bad record. And that's
That's
as
a
a
good record,
youngster.
that is, for a young lad.
Yeah. And firing them into the playoffs to get him up, but they never quite got there. So he then earned his move to Charlton in 2005. Overall at Charlton, he only made 68 appearances. I thought he might have played there a little bit more, but he played 68 times, scored 31 goals. And
That
Charlton,
is a great return.
yeah, Charlton weren't pulling up many trees in the Premier League at this time. So to get that, I mean, in the 2005-2006 season, so his debut Premier League season, he scored 18 Premier League goals, 22 in all comps. He was the third highest goal scorer in the league that season.
No way. In 05-06?
Third highest goal scorer behind 2 unbelievable strikers. Second place was Ruud van Nistelrooy. First place was Thierry Henry.
No way.
That
So
is
Darren Bent was third.
So he was also the highest scoring Englishman. So that's the 2005-2006 season. So that's going into the 2006 World Cup. He wasn't called up.
What? Who was the manager at the time? Sven?
Yeah,
would have been
Sven Goran
Sven, yeah.
Eriksson.
You would have gone
Why did
with.
you take him?
It would have been
Well-
Rooney and Owen, would it?
Yeah, they were the two that were ahead of him.
And what was
Um,
Owen
I-
at Real Madrid at that time? Or was he?
Was he back at Newcastle by then? I think he might have been. But yeah, so he didn't get called up to the England squad for that World Cup in 2006, which I thought was mad. He was given Charlton's Player of the Year. And then the following season, 2006-2007, was the year that Charlton actually went down from the Premier League. And he still got 13 league goals. So even in a side that were fighting for their lives, he was still scoring goals. And that then obviously earned him his big £16.5 million move to Tottenham. Now, Tottenham, I think, is where his quality was probably most questioned because he wasn't as good at Tottenham as he was at Charlton. So 60
Yeah, because he
appearances
was an
for
Arsenal
Tottenham.
fan, that's why.
Wow, yeah, he used to go with his dad, didn't he? I think he had a season ticket. Yeah. So yeah, 16.5 million in 2007. Pretty big money at the time. 18 goals in 60, so a little bit more of a mixed spell, but still scoring goals. It's not an absolutely dreadful record, but I think you'd expect more from a striker who'd scored the goals that he had at Charlton. Obviously, probably most remembered at Tottenham for his miss in front of the open goal in the last few minutes of the game against Pompey, which meant that Tottenham didn't get a win, and Harry Redknapp went on to claim that you'll never get a better chance to win a match than that. My missus could have scored that one. So probably one of the things he's most remembered for. But I mean, the 2008-2009 season with Tottenham, he was their top goal scorer. He got 17 in 43. But what hadn't helped is I think within that season was when Robbie Keane signed back for the club after his failed move his move at Liverpool failed. He then moved back to Tottenham, and I think then he was going to become the main man again up front for them rather than Darren Bent. Moved on then to Sunderland, again 16.5 million, so Tottenham got back exactly what they paid for him. Sunderland again, he was one of the Premier League's most informed strikers in his time there. He got 32 in 58.
Wow. 32 in 58.
I think that shows as well, when you really think about that time, that era of Premier League football and how much of a shambles Spurs was as a club, and you look at what Darren Bent did before, you look at what Darren Bent did after, and you go, it has to be down to just the way the club was run and the people in charge at the time. Because how would you not get a better return out of a striker like Darren Bent at Spurs? It's just, yeah, mind-boggling.
24 in 38 Premier League games. Done a little bit of research into why he didn't get selected for that 2006 squad. So him and Jermaine Defoe were not picked for that England squad in 2006. Michael Owen and Wayne Rooney were picked, obviously, over them, but also they took Theo Walcott. Now, Theo
Yeah.
Walcott at the time had never played in the Prem. Obviously, he just made his move to Arsenal in that summer, but he had not played in the Premier League. So they took Theo Walcott, the young kid that he was, they took him over Darren Bent. So I think, like, you think about what obviously happened before Tottenham, as you just said, Ad, with the goals he scored, 18 and 36, 13 and 32, the highest goal scorer in the Premier League in 05-06 season, and he's not going to the World Cup.
Yeah.
If he'd have gone to the World Cup, would we be talking about Darren Bent as a completely different player? Because clearly he can score goals.
Well, his England career is crazy, really. I've got a little bit on that a bit further on, but I think, a player that was scoring that consistently, but also for the clubs that he was scoring the goals for, like I said before, they're not teams that were sort of necessarily pulling up trees in the Premier League. They weren't going for Europe or stuff like that. They were clubs that were doing okay or lingering down the bottom, but maybe staying safe. But even to get 13 in a season that Charlton got relegated, if he goes to that World Cup and gets a bit of game time, does he score important goals for England? And like you say, if he had done that, I don't think there's any way we'd be discussing him on this podcast because his quality would not have been questioned at all then. But then
It's
I
crazy the
suppose,
numbers he was putting up. It's crazy the numbers he was putting
I
up.
mean, the Sunderland numbers are absolutely mad. In the 2010 season, in all comps, he got 25 in 40. 24 of those were in the Premier League. Those 24 goals were 50% of Sunderland's total goals in the league that season.
Wow.
Again, that year, third top scorer in the Premier League. Who was he behind that year? Rooney was in second, Drogba was first.
So you're talking the third best striker in the league. And if you're comparing that to what we're like now, and people like, oh, we need number 9. We need to get that player who's going to score them goals. It's, as England at the moment, we're thinking, right, who's going to back up Harry Kane? And we're thinking about that. If there was a Darren Bent, would we be saying it's Darren Bent going on the plane, or would we be saying, there's someone else at the time who's not
Yeah.
scoring as many goals?
Obviously, the manager was Sven at the time, and we did predominantly play 4-4-2, especially in the 2006 World Cup. He only took 3 forwards, quote-unquote number 9s. He took Wayne Rooney, as we mentioned, Michael Owen, as we mentioned, and Peter Crouch.
And what's Crouchy scoring that season? I don't know without looking into his numbers what he was scoring on that season. You'd probably, are Michael Owen, are Wayne Rooney, are Darren Bent quite similar strikers?
So I suppose Peter Crouch is the different option there, isn't he? When you're playing 4-4-2 and getting crosses in the box, he's an ideal one to have one of those two. And I mean, his goal scoring record for England speaks for itself. He had a really good goal scoring record when he played internationally. I don't know 2005, 2006, would he have been at Liverpool at that point? He didn't score that many, I don't think, for Liverpool.
Peter Crouch was at Liverpool during that time, yeah.
But is it because he plays for Liverpool? Is it because he
Wow.
plays for the big club? And obviously he got
Yeah.
a big move to Liverpool, didn't he? And he was really successful at Liverpool. But is it because he's at Liverpool that he gets picked over Darren Bent?
I think the major talking point, actually, just while we're on the topic of the 2006 World Cup squad, is did anyone know that Wayne Bridge was in the 2006 England World Cup squad? Did anyone know that Aaron Lennon was in the 2006 World Cup squad? Stuart Downing was in the 2006 World Cup squad. I mean,
You got
obviously,
different players, different era, though, isn't it?
obviously, you got Jamie Carragher in there as well. You've got he took just so we know, instead of taking one of Jermaine Defoe or Darren Bent, both of which you could argue should have been in the squad, Sven-Goran Eriksson took 4 goalkeepers. He took Paul Robinson, David James, Robert Green, and Scott Carson.
What?
And you think, not even just the outfield players that I've mentioned there, you'd think, why are you taking 4 goalkeepers when the third highest scoring Premier League striker of the time, or just player in general, was English, and you're not taking him to a World Cup, but yet you're taking 4 goalkeepers?
It's just crazy to me.
He's took
Mad.
more goalkeepers than he did traditional number 9s in that World Cup.
And people wonder why the Golden Generation never won anything. Well, after Sunderland, his big money January move to Aston Villa. So he played the first half of the season at Sunderland and he'd scored 8 goals in the league then, and he signed for Villa for 18 million and it rose to 24. So he went for another big money fee. Played 16 times then in the Premier League for Villa the rest of that season. He got 9 in 16. Big numbers. So he was the club's joint top scorer with Ashley Young, and he'd only played half a season. But also, again, top English goal scorer in the Premier League and the 4th highest overall with 17. 8 for Sunderland, 9 for Villa.
I mean, I'm lost for words about the fact that we're talking about Darren Bent, because you remember Darren Bent playing football, obviously, when we were a lot younger. And the fact that his consistency was questioned is quite funny, considering that the only club he actually struggled at was Tottenham. It was a Aston Villa club record fee. Like, they spent lots of money on him. I mean, at the time, £24 million in 2011. Obviously, it's not the same about money as it is these days, but that's a lot of money. In 2011 for a striker, that is a lot of money. And
I
obviously,
think
he would have paid
he's
it.
gone for the price tags, though, hasn't he? Like, he has gone for big money everywhere he's gone. So clearly
Yeah.
he is rated. Clearly he is rated as a striker. Obviously, the highest club he's been at is Spurs. There must have been, if there's more context at the time, the fact that, scoring 12 in 33 apparently is not enough. In 2008, 2009, that he gets sold to Sunderland, and that's where he goes and has his big goal scoring spree. But he's obviously rated. He is rated, but he's not rated by those big clubs. And I include Spurs in that because they're not, are they? I think that time did they is that the year they won the Carling?
So they won the League Cup in 2008. So he was there for that. I don't think he actually played in the final, but he was there. He was at the club at that time. Yeah.
It's injuries, inconsistencies.
Well,
what is it?
He did struggle with injuries. I mean, his overall Premier League record, right? This is what I found crazy. So we got 106 Premier League goals in total, which puts him 30th in the all-time Premier League top scorers list. He is above players like Didier Drogba, Matt Letizia and Cristiano Ronaldo. He scored more Premier League goals than the 3 of those. And you think like they are seen as top tier players, top tier strikers, top tier goal scorers. Darren Bent outscored the 3 of them.
And don't get me wrong, you can play for the smaller clubs and get your goals, but he's been about, and he's Premier League goals. It's not, all-time career goals. It's Premier League goals, Premiership defenders. And even if you play for the worst teams, you're having less chances a game. So you're scoring best part of probably a goal out of created 3 or 4 chances. If you're at a big club, you're probably getting, 7, 8 chances and you score one of those, you're seen as a god. So that's mad. Them stats are crazy.
But for somebody with 106 Premier League goals to have only earned 13 caps for England, scored 4 times, but never played for England at a major tournament. And there were a couple of times, or there were 1 or 2 times, I think, when that was down to injuries. But other times he was included in the 30-man preliminary squad and then wasn't included in the 23 or the 25 that got taken. Yet producing those sorts of numbers. 106 in 276 in the Premier League. And yet never played at a major tournament for England. Now, I know 2008 Euros we didn't qualify, so missed the boat on that completely. But 2006 World Cup, 2010, the 2012 Euros, he's scoring goals between all of those years there and somehow never represented England at an international tournament.
I just think as well, I mean, I've got his international career up here. I mean, played 14 times for the England under-21s, scored 9 goals. Played 3 times for the under-19s, scored 3 goals. Played 11 times for the under-16s, scored 3 goals. Played 8 times for the under-15s, scored 7 goals. And you go, at what point do you just... And the fact that he's got more England under-21 caps than he does senior England caps.
Problem, mate, and when the elephant in the room, it's Wayne Rooney. So that game they played against Portugal, when obviously they drew 0-0 and went out on penalties, was it?
Yep.
Yeah.
It was.
Wayne Rooney was the only recognised 9. So Joe Cole was up front with him. So it's all well and good in hindsight and saying, how did he not get more England caps and stuff like that with his goals that are going on? If they're only playing one striker, one recognised 9, if they're not playing both Owen and Rooney, and let's be honest, just on name paper alone, with us not being around at the time, Wayne Rooney and Michael Owen are both generational footballers. yes, we're saying that he should be in the squad. We're saying that, aren't we? We're saying that he should have at least been on the bench, Darren Bent, but he isn't starting over them two. And if Wayne's not playing, Michael Owen's playing. If Michael's not playing, Wayne's playing. You're not playing Darren Bent. No matter what his numbers are, Wayne Rooney is Wayne Rooney at the end of the day.
It's a shame that he didn't get more minutes in a major England tournament anyway, but you think in that time, you've envisioned the penalty takers that we had in that shootout against Portugal. You go, like, why is he not just in and around the squad for them sort of moments? I remember Jamie Carragher taking a penalty.
Yeah.
And you go, well, if you'd have brought Darren Bent, I mean, I'll throw Jermaine Defoe into that conversation as well. If you'd have brought Darren Bent, if you would have brought Jermaine Defoe, like, you've got actual strikers who score a lot of goals, and you're not taking them because Sven decided to take 4 goalkeepers.
Yeah, so I mean, when he was at Villa, he'd started well. Then he struggled with a few injuries, so he had a few loan spells out and about. He went to Fulham on loan and got 3 in 24 there. He had a short spell at Brighton, got 2 in 5 there. Then he went to Derby on loan and he got 10 in 15. So really ramped up his numbers again. So his Villa contract then ended and he signed for Derby on a free, and he was there 2.5, 3 years, 12 goals in 58. And then he went on to Burton Albion on loan for 6 months at the end of the 17-18 season, got a couple of goals there as well, and then retired in 2019. And obviously now he's
signed
on
with TalkSport.
TalkSport. Couple of really interesting things about him. Now, we had our conversation in episode 1 about Jermaine Pennant and his tag and being a naughty boy. Darren Bent in June 2004 was given a formal caution by police because he was alleged to have shot a 12-year-old with a pellet gun.
What?
Yeah. So, I mean, June 2004, when was Darren Bent born? 1984. So Darren Bent was 20 and he was alleged to have shot a 12-year-old with a pellet gun and was given a formal caution. I mean, I've not looked much further into it, to be honest. I just thought that was a real moment for him. Obviously, 17th of October 2009, he will always be remembered for the beach ball incident at the Stadium of Light, which I think is great to this day that Liverpool fans still cry about that.
That is mad, isn't it? The way that happened, that's just crazy. That floating across, coming across the goal line.
Pepe Reina just not knowing which way to go.
The best thing about that entire moment is Pepe Reina, and he's just like, the referee's like, what am I supposed to do? What'd you do? And he is going absolutely balmy at the referee. He is hands in the air, and it's just, as a Man United fan, to see a Liverpool goalkeeper in that much stress over the fact that the ball's gone in off a beach ball, it makes me smile. It makes me smile.
It's even better that the beach ball came from the Liverpool supporters. That's the greatest thing about this. It came from the Liverpool supporters.
That moment is up there with Gerrard slipping against Chelsea. It is up there. It's up there.
Yeah. And then finally on Darren Bent, in 2019, he went on the Celebrity Mastermind, and across the 2 rounds, what total point score do you think he got?
No idea.
I'm going with 0.
He got 3. He got 3 points across 2 rounds, and he described it as the worst experience of my life. Which I thought would have been playing for Tottenham, but no, it's apparently Celebrity Mastermind.
Mastermind must have been bad if it was worse than playing for Tottenham.
That's Darren Bent.
That's brilliant. That has caused a lot of debate, questioning Sven-Goran Eriksson, questioning everything. So, wow. Darren Bent, the prolific goal scorer that no one knew about. The numbers he put up, that's just crazy. So the team I was given was Pompey, and as you both know, I have a little bit of an affiliation for Pompey. It was just that old ground. It was the feel of like the massive underdogs, and then obviously they started then buying some decent players, and they started to become good. And I think about Portsmouth back in the 08 season, and obviously when they won the FA Cup. So, some of the names, Papa Bouba Diop, you think about Nico Cranchar, you think about Suleiman Tari, Sol Campbell played at the time, David James. So I could have chose any of those players, and we will speak about a lot of them in the next episodes that we do. But the player that I've chosen, the number 25, this lad coming from Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Absolute baller. And honestly, he made me just like fall in love with football at the time. And watching him play, and I had this real like secret like crush on them, I suppose. You know, like Arsenal, yeah, Arsenal my team, but like Portsmouth, I just love watching them. And then when they got relegated a few years afterwards, I was like, I got to get a shirt. So I had Cash number 7 on the back of my shirt, had the Pompey shirt. Oh, I loved it. And the Kappa stuff, it was brilliant. They were in some terrible times then. But Benjani, let's stick to the player that we got. So the guy's from Zimbabwe, and then that speaks for himself. You know, he's made it to the Premier League, being from Zimbabwe. Not many Zimbabweans have made it to the Premier League. So went from Zimbabwe into South Africa, and he got signed by a South African team called Jomo Cosmos, which is a standard South African team. And he was mentored by some South African football legends. And he won, actually, the Player of the Season in the South African Premier League. He then left and moved to Europe. And he went on a loan move to, again, Grasshopper Zurich. So not only Henry Camara from the first episode, who played for Grasshopper Zurich, we've got Benjani, who played for Grasshopper Zurich. He then left for Auxerre in France, and he actually started becoming prominent in the team when a certain Dribble Cisse got injured. So then he started playing in the squad. And he actually scored in the 2005 Coupe de France final. He actually left Auxerre and he signed for Portsmouth for a record club fee at the time for 4.1 million. And it was actually based upon the fact that Arsene Wenger basically told Harry Redknapp to go and sign him. So Harry Redknapp said, I've got this Zimbabwean. You can imagine the conversation, can't you? So he could have had the choice. He could have signed for Pompey or he could have signed for Marseille. He chose to sign for Pompey based purely on the fact that he could speak better English than he could French. So if he'd have spoke better French, even at being at Auxerre, he'd have been playing for Marseille. So he literally had the choice between the two and decided to join Pompey. And obviously it was an iconic Premier League spell. He was obviously a cult hero. He eventually left Portsmouth for 7.6 million and he joined Manchester City. So again, we're thinking about a player who's making those stepping stones. He's really taken a journey forward. Signed by Sven at Man City, who clearly didn't have an eye for a striker. So he signed Benjani. Should have probably signed Darren Bent at that time. So Portsmouth, basically, it's a real famous interview that Harry Redknapp did on, I think it was that old goals show on BT Sport with Jake Humphrey. It's a great show. Just like, it was like after the game or before a game, wasn't it? And they used to have loads of different stars on. So Harry Redknapp's on there basically telling the story about how Benjani signed for Man City. So it was on deadline day and Pompey were in a bit of need for a bit of cash. And obviously they received an offer from Man City for 7.6 million. And it was deadline day in January. Halfway through the season, Pompey are absolutely flying. Deadline day. So Harry Redknapp gets on the phone to Benjani and says, Benjani, you need to go. You need to leave. You go into Man City. Benjani's like, Gaffer, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. I want to just stay at Portsmouth and play for the rest of my career. And literally, Harry Redknapp is telling him, you need to go. You have to go. It's 7.6 million. It's too much money. Not telling him that actually, because they've received this bid, that they've just gone and got Jermaine Defoe. They've not told anyone yet. They've just bought Jermaine Defoe to replace Benjani. But Benjani, you need to leave now. Benjani refusing basically to go, he missed 2 planes to go to Manchester, meaning that he arrived later than the deadline. So he arrived at 11:10 at the club's training ground to complete his medical. He actually signed after the deadline, so he allowed it to go through because the paperwork had been done. It just he never turned up to do his medical. And obviously back then it was obviously 11 p.m. deadline. Now it just seems, we can sign a player whenever, doesn't it? But they actually got fined 15 grand for breaching the transfer rules. Portsmouth did, because they didn't submit the documents in time, so he never actually completed. He shouldn't have completed the signing. This is a common theme with Man City, the fact that they're breaking transfer fee rules. But anyway, that's a story for another day. And the fact that Portsmouth get fined because later on, obviously they get points deductions. They nearly go into liquidation. They're just a mess of a club that have been run there. He obviously went to Man City. He did okay there, not great. He then went to Sunderland on loan, then to Blackburn Rovers. So he's had a mixture of Premier League clubs. And then he actually went back to Portsmouth in the 11-12 season. And then he finished with spells back in South Africa. So he's literally gone full circle. Started in Zimbabwe, went to South Africa, and then full circle right the way through the English Premier League, through France, and then returned back to South Africa. And he's now working with the Plymouth Argyle Academy. So he's currently doing his coaching there. But let's talk about Benjani because he is an absolute workhorse. He is absolutely brilliant on the football pitch in terms of running the channels, in terms of being physical, being aggressive. He just constantly ran and constantly pressed. He was constantly battling defenders all the time. And a real selfish player. You know, he just covered so much ground. You know, he'd often say himself that it felt like he was covering two players on the pitch. You know, the one goal that he scores when Utaka gets it down the left-hand side in the game they won 7-4 against Reading. It was the highest scoring game at the time. And, you know, Utaka gets it down the left-hand side, crosses the ball in, you know, then Benjani gets on the end of it. So he always worked really well with the strikers who were with him. He's not naturally like a clinical finisher, but he just works so hard. And for his effort rates that he put in, it's just fantastic. He's just exactly what you want. And that's why City went and got him at the time, because they wanted that workhorse up front. At Portsmouth, he scored 19 Premier League goals, and he scored 2 hat-tricks, and he got 6 assists in his 70 Premier League appearances for Portsmouth. So before Portsmouth, obviously, he was a top scorer in Ligue 1 before joining Portsmouth, which I think is mad in the stat itself. He only scored 11 goals, but the fact that he scored 11 goals and was still the top goal scorer in Ligue 1, you know, that shows a lot. And then obviously afterwards, he left to go and join Man City. After leaving Man City, he had the choice of going to either like Notts County at that time. Remember when they signed Sol Campbell and stuff? And obviously he had the choice
Big
to go
Sven
there.
was the manager, wasn't he, at that point?
And Sven was the manager again, so trying to sign him again. Sven, you're featuring a lot in this episode. And then obviously he went to South Africa after that. But, you know, some of the goals he scored were just brilliant Premier League goals, you know, tight spaces, obviously Fratton Park, which is incredibly hostile, but him scoring them goals, he just became such a fan favourite. And yeah, I just think the guy, that number 25 for Portsmouth, you can say what you want about, you know, Man City and stuff, but him playing for Portsmouth, he was just iconic, and he's an iconic Premier League player.
I just want to touch on Benjani's transfer saga, shall we say, between Portsmouth and Man City. I've just done a little bit of research on it here. Obviously, I know you mentioned that there was a bid accepted for 7.6 million for Benjani from Portsmouth, but it was actually turned out that Man City only paid £3.87 million for him on a 2.5-year deal, but further payments would have taken up to 7.6 million if Benjani made 70 starts. So
Negotiated brilliantly there.
But let's look about where Portsmouth are now, shall we say, and obviously it's all the repercussions of that. How many times, without checking, and even though I know Liam has already checked, Con, I'll ask you this question if you haven't checked already. To make the total go up to 7.6 million, Benjani would have had to pay 75 times for Man City. How many times do you reckon he played?
He was there 2.5 years, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And he spent a bit of time on loan at Sunderland.
Yes, he did, yeah.
So I'm going to say he made 23 appearances.
You have got that spot on. He made 23 appearances for Man City.
Wow.
And you think that, obviously, again, we'll go back to the state that Portsmouth are necessarily in at this moment in time, but it's deals like this, even though it was a long time ago, that causes problems in the club long term. You say you have a £7.6 million bid accepted for Benjani, but then Man City only pay 3.87, but then in 2.5 years, which is like almost impossible, especially if a player gets injured, for that fee to rise up to 7.6 million, he'd have to make 75 career senior starts in 2.5 years.
It's crazy.
He's got to be playing every game with that, hasn't he? He's got to be.
He literally has got to be playing every game, so he can't miss a game for you to. So ultimately, Portsmouth lost out on just under £4 million because of the negotiations in the transfer fee.
So at that time in that squad, he's competing with, obviously Giovanni played in the midfield, but he's competing with him in terms of goal scoring because he got 17 and 19 in that year. He's competing with Alano. He's competing with Darius Vassell. He's competing with Bianchi. He's competing with Impenza. That's before you're even talking. And sorry, we're not talking about it now, but I've just seen him play for City at that time as well. Georgios Samaras, mate. Oh my God.
Oh.
So you think Benjani played 13 times that season? So they've already got like goal scorers everywhere because obviously at that time they're buying players ridiculously. There's no way he's playing that many times.
No
chance.
Isn't it? I don't know whether it was that season or whether it would have been the summer after they signed Benjani in the January. But didn't City at that time sign Robinho?
They did. They did, and he went on to play 41 times.
I mean, again, we'll talk about the City money and everything like that, because obviously
And Daniel Sturridge.
this is when the City money first came into effect. It was reported that Benjani was on 50 grand a week.
I want to know, what did Robinho go there on? Because if he's on 50 grand a week, what was Robinho on?
I'm going to have
It's
to have
got
a
to be
quick look at that.
double at least. At the minimum, he's got to have been on 100.
I'll be 100 plus, hasn't he?
He's got to be.
He was massive, right?
Like,
Well,
the
yeah,
fact
because
that
that was deadline day, wasn't it? And it was,
yeah.
they thought he was going to Chelsea, and next thing you know, he rocks up at Man City. But was it Robinho where it came out that he thought he was signing for United? He'd heard that.
Oh no.
There was something about he'd heard there was a Manchester team that wanted him, and he thought it was United, and he rocked up, and it turned out it was City.
Thing is,
I've just
he
seen
was
as
good,
well.
wasn't he? But like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, was meant to be world class, and he just never produced, did he?
So whether he's an LQQer in the future, I'm not
Oh,
sure.
he could
It's a
be.
lot
He
of money
could
on an
be.
LQQer, that one.
Yeah.
Just on Robinho quickly, just while I try and find his wage. It was like you just said, Con. Apparently, a reporter asked him about his deadline day move, and he said, on the last day, Chelsea made a great proposal, and I accepted. And then the reporter replied, "Do you mean Manchester?" And Robinho goes, "Yeah, Manchester. Sorry." So he was adamant that he was going to Chelsea. He was adamant he was going to Chelsea, and then he had to correct himself because he went to go and sign for Man City.
Poor Benjani, like, this is where I feel sorry for him, because he obviously thinks he's the man. You know, you're getting signed by the club that's got all the money, or gonna get all the money, and you're one of the players they're pretty much putting their house on. You know, he scores some great goals for Pompey, though. The one ball over the top, floated over the top against Newcastle. He literally shoves off the defender and holds him off, hits it on like the half volley into the bottom corner. You know, he's just got some great Premier League goals. All right. So let's recap then. So, Adam, with your player, just remind us who you chose, please.
I selected Matt Jarvis.
Matt Jarvis, obviously a winger. Connor, remind us who you picked.
I picked Darren Bent.
And then I've gone for a similar striker, not the same level of numbers, with Benjani. So now it's time to see who will enter the LQQ, the League of Questionable Quality. So, Matt Jarvis, let's talk about him first because he's the first player that came up. What are the reasons to put him in?
I think one of the main reasons why you put him in is because, again, I'll go back to it, you're quintessential right midfielder in that era of the Premier League and the teams that he played in. You can't ask for much more than what he delivered.
So I completely agree. I think Matt Jarvis, I just think about a pure right winger. And I think we've lost that in the game. You know, that's what we see in a right winger, you know, the right foot, the whipping into the box, someone feeding on the end of it, you know, such a workhorse. What do you think about Darren Bent then, Con?
From looking into him, he is not of questionable quality, but actually his quality was questioned so much throughout his career. You could ask people to give you your best Premier League 11 of all time, and you could ask them to do that 10, 15 times over, choosing different players every time. And I don't think anybody ever would put Darren Bent in that squad. But actually, the numbers he produced, 106 Premier League goals, 30th all-time Premier League goal scorer, above the likes of Drogba, Ronaldo, Letitia, Torres. You know, he was never considered to be elite, and question marks were asked of him because he was productive everywhere he went. He scored goals everywhere he went. And because I think he moved a lot, and because he had spells where he was slightly inconsistent, I think that's why people questioned him. But actually, as a poacher, which is what he was really, you could put him into your team and you knew that he'd get you goals.
And then we finish up with Benjani. He has not got the amount of Premier League appearances that Matt Jarvis has. He's not got the goals that Darren Bent has. He's not got probably the impact that Darren Bent had either. But we're talking about someone who's pure Barclays, who is pure nostalgia. You know, you think about strikers of questionable quality. Benjani is the striker of questionable quality. How did someone like Benjani play in the Premier League? And that is the question you have to ask. So that's Benjani. So, boys, who's going in?
Much I do really rate my pick this week of Matt Jarvis. I think you two boys have blown me out of the water in respect of the two names that you've brought forward. So however much I would love to have back-to-back players going into the LQQ from myself, I think I'm going to shift Matt Jarvis aside, even though I think he's brilliant, and obviously I've had my thoughts on him already. I think with Darren Bent, I think with the league being the league of questionable quality, it depends on how you view the league of whether he needs to go in or not. I think his quality was questioned, but in my opinion, he doesn't have questionable quality, especially the way we've spoken about him.
That's the beauty. That's the beauty of this LQQ, isn't it? I 100% get what you're saying. He has not had his quality is not questionable because he's a bloody good footballer and he's clearly scored goals, but his quality has been questioned.
Has been questioned, yeah.
It shouldn't have been questioned when you look at the numbers, and it's only because I've done this research into him that I've fully changed my opinion on him, because I immediately would think Darren Bent, a bit of a cart horse.
So who goes, like, what's the arguments for Benjani?
I think with Benjani, take the nostalgia glasses off and stop thinking about him in that Pompey shirt doing a celebration, and think about his actual technical ability. Was he actually a Premier League footballer? Does he have questionable quality? And you have to go with, yeah, he does.
I mean, I would even go as far as saying, did he have any quality? Because I expected him to have better numbers than what you'd mentioned before. I really did. Was it 19 in 70 at Portsmouth? I thought he'd scored more than that. I really did. And then even like his spells before that in France to be the top goal scorer in Ligue 1 with 11 goals, like you said, that says a lot about the quality in France at the time. But also, absolutely, I questioned whether he had any quality.
But did he get the big move that Darren Bent wanted? At that time, Man City weren't looking at a Darren Bent. Now, it was that 2007, 2008. Where was Bent then? Was he just signing for...
Darren Bent had just signed for Tottenham. Yeah, he just signed for Spurs that year. Yeah, left Charlton in 2007.
Now, the question we have to talk about Benjani is, was Sven-Goran Eriksson just looking at compilations of his hat-trick against Reading and gone, I'm going to buy the money on that. I've got a boatload of cash behind me. He scored a hat-trick against Reading. I could have a bit of that in my side, because let's face it, even though if you think nowadays with Man City, there's a method behind their signings, but back then, it reminds me of a lot of Chelsea of nowadays. Like, is it just he's young and he's reasonably good in the Premier League? He scored a couple of goals.
That's it. It's Premier League proven, isn't it? That's what.
Do I just go and sign him? Do you just go and sign him because of that? I mean, I don't know. But
so just to summarise, it's between Darren Bent, isn't it? And it's between Darren Bent and Benjani. And the idea of who's in it right now. So we've got Jason Puncheon, we've got Kevin Doyle. Those are our two players who are currently in it. It's a league of questionable quality. Who's in it? Is it Benjani or is it Darren Bent?
In terms of what the league actually stands for, I'm going to go for Benjani.
I'm really torn. This is a really difficult one, because I think they both summarise what the league is. Because as we've said so many times already, Darren Bent's quality was questioned and people doubted him and thought he was useless or whatever. But Benjani had very little quality. When it actually came to playing in the Premier League, there wasn't an awful lot that went on. I'm really, really torn. Really, I might have to go back to one of my famous wheels here to pick between the two, because I'm so torn.
Let's think about who's in the league already. So we've got Kevin Doyle, we've got Jason Puncheon, and you think about the two names that we might be adding to that league. Darren Bent, does he fit along them names that were already in the league?
He's better, isn't he?
Or in my opinion, he's better. Or does Benjani fit into that league better than Darren Bent does?
I think Benjani screams of going into the league. And I think the only reason for me that Darren Bent doesn't get in is because if I'd have just thrown out Darren Bent and not done any of the research into his goals and the numbers that he got, then Darren Bent would probably walk straight in, because you'd think, well, yeah, he's probably a better player than Benjani, but he's still questionable in terms of that. But I think because of the actual numbers and the stats that exist for Darren Bent, which prove that actually he was probably criminally underrated, I think Benjani probably goes in.
That's what you just hit the nail on the head. When we think about questionable quality, Sven questioned his quality, didn't pick him. Tottenham sold him, didn't want him. Again, we don't know the real context behind all this, but the guy scored goals and it was questioned everywhere he went. And when you bring up the name Darren Bent, we think, was he that good? But he actually scored goals.
We are talking about mid-2000s Tottenham Hotspur and England under Sven-Goran Eriksson and Steve McLaren. I think you do have to take that into consideration because, like I say, Tottenham at that time were a shambles. England failed to qualify for the 2008 Euros. Like, is it really paper over cracks when you think about who didn't think he had any quality? Whereas you look at Benjani and you go, okay, Harry Redknapp signed him just off a conversation with Arsene Wenger. So obviously Harry Redknapp was just listening to someone else and gone, yeah, I'll buy him. And then again, funnily enough, Sven's involved with the Benjani transfer. And you go, what's actually going on at Man City at that time as well? I mean, they just got all this money. They've gone, let's just buy everyone that we can buy. And I think Benjani has to go in.
For cult hero status, I think Benjani for me.
Like you say, he is a Barclaysman.
Yep.
He is exactly what a Barclaysman is. And I think what furthers his questionable quality for me is some of the managers he played under, particularly his second spell at Portsmouth. He was managed by one Michael Appleton. Questionable quality.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Finest.
It's crazy.
Just got sacked by the town and he managed Benjani once.
Yep, he did. I think so.
Benjani, you have been welcomed into the League of Questionable Quality. And that name of that league has been debated tonight because it is the League of Questionable Quality. And Benjani, you are right up there. A Zimbabwean that has made it into Premier League football and not just been a player that we forget, a player that we remember, and we remember the name Benjani, at number 25. Benjani, played for Man City, played for Portsmouth. You are now in the League of Questionable Quality. You have joined Jason Punchin and Kevin Doyle as part of the League of Questionable Quality. There are still 7 spots to fill, and we'll see in the later episodes who will fill those. Connor, you need to spin the wheel, please, for the next episode.
Yeah, so first one out of the hat then for Adam is West Ham United.
Okay, West Ham for Adam. Again, you could have picked Matt Jarvis. West Ham, you've got some players there. You've got some players to choose from.
Loads.
Connor, spin it for yourself.
Right, next up we have Tottenham Hotspur.
Tottenham Hotspur. If I ever get Spurs, I'm actually going to refuse. Can we just get rid of Spurs for me? Is that possible on my wheel?
Adam could go for Matt Jarvis again. I could go for Darren Bent again with that.
You could.
Darren Bent might actually finally get in.
Right then, spin the wheel for me.
Right, who have we got? Oh, Leicester City.
Leicester. Oh, that's hard because do you go rubbish Leicester or do you go title winning side Leicester? That's the question.
I mean, there are some whoppers in both, to be fair.
There are some questionable quality in both. Well, thank you for listening. If you've listened this long, it's been a long episode indeed. Thank you for listening. And just to summarise, Jason Punchin, Kevin Doyle, Benjani, you are in the League of Questionable Quality. Thank you for listening.